So the
Yeah.
topic of Instagram growth strategies and content is something that we talk about all the time. I mean, how many people come to you, Enrico, wanting to grow their following, just starting there?
Often, a lot. Yeah.
I think
For,
that's
for,
a
for,
magic thing.
yeah. It's interesting. I don't know why Instagram still has such like a status with like around like, well, I want to grow my Instagram. And I'm like, there's other platforms like to want to grow, but specifically Instagram too. I think it just has like this status stigma is what I'll call it.
I agree with you. I don't hear people talking as much about growing their LinkedIn, growing their YouTube, growing their TikTok. I mean, maybe TikTok a little bit, but I think Instagram is where a lot of, I mean, we're talking about health and fitness coaches in that industry. And I think that that's just where we all started, right? Sending oatmeal pictures back in 2012. And that's all it really took to grow a following. So I do want to ask you, tell me how you got into, what was the first platform for you? Was it Instagram? And how did that kind of take off into where you are now?
Yeah, so I would say no, my first platform that I really got into was YouTube. Because early on I was in college and the whole reason why I got into YouTube was because I didn't want to become a doctor anymore. And the reason YouTube was my outlet was because I saw people like Christian Guzman, who is the owner of Alpha Elite Athletics, Max Tuning, who is the owner of Everforward and Sour Strips. I saw that they were doing it. And I would watch other people like Casey Neistat, who's well known on YouTube as well, for just vlogging. And I'm like, you know what, like they can do it. And mind you, like I had an Instagram. It's not like I was using it. It was just like I had an Instagram. It was funny. My original Instagram was called Rico Fit 23 because I was like, I'm gonna post fitness stuff and I'm gonna post like my lifts and whatever. That was when like posting your lifts was like, okay, like this is what's gonna grow because it's like it's what's super cool. Before we're at now. But that was my outlet was YouTube. And I enjoyed the, if we want to call it creative expression to be able to post on there. It was something where I'm like, I literally would skip class because I'm like, I want to go get a B-roll shot for my vlog because it was fun for me. And it was something where I'm like, I enjoy telling a story via YouTube. And it was, and arguably, I didn't even know, but like now that I know now, it's the hardest platform to grow on. And it's something where I'm like, I respect the platform so much because the work that goes into it, not a lot of people like realize how much work goes into YouTube and how much work goes into pre-planning and filming, editing, the thumbnail, script, like everything. It's like you're literally your own producer and your own AMC to show it, right? And so that's how I look at YouTube. But I have such respect for the platform, and to this day, it's my ultimate favorite platform still.
Nice. So tell me how you got into the like fitness industry, right? Because I know you worked with like Jordan Syatt. Like what was that like? How did you go
Yeah.
from that to where you're at today and becoming an expert in all things growth, right? Like why should I listen to you, you know?
Yeah, fair. The reason you should listen to me, number one, is because I have no tolerance. And at the end of the day, my motto is be a fucking shark. So I don't accept anything less than being a fucking shark when it comes to social and life. So that's number one. Number two, the reason I got into all this essentially is tying it back to the beginning to where I didn't want to become a doctor. And I looked at fitness as an outlet for me because I had dropped medical school because, or not even medical school, pre-med, because I realized I was doing it for my father. And I realized that it was no longer serving me. It was no longer something that I was passionate about. It was more of his thing. And long about way, fitness ultimately at the time and YouTube and social media quite literally saved my life because it was my outlet for me. It was the thing for me that I'm like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing, but I can figure it out. And I have this like free playground to kind of just explore and test different things. And like I said, that's when I mentioned Christian Guzman, Max Tuning, and Christian specifically I latched onto because he was going to Texas Christian University, TCU, and he dropped out. And I'm like, okay, I'm like, he made it work. He can do this. I'm like, so can I, you know? And the one piece of content that gave me permission for the rest of my life to go do anything was from Gary Vaynerchuk was I would rather you spend the next 2 to 3 years doing what you want to do and not pleasing your parents versus spending the next 80 years doing what they wanted you to do and resenting them. That hit me like a ton of bricks because I was like, okay, that's me. Now what? And from that point on, it became, okay, I need to figure out what Enrico wants and what Enrico wants to do. And this whole fitness thing for me was something that I was passionate about. I didn't know what I was doing, like I said, but I was just testing different things. And I think that's important for anyone listening on, especially if you're a fitness coach or just trying different things in social. It's important to just test, right? I look at it as testing different things, much like you test a PR, much like you test a different way to lift the deadlift or the bench press, whatever that is. Like much like you test different things within your clients, it's all testing. That's how I look at social media. The same thing. And I got into fitness because, like I said, it quite literally saved my life, but also because I was genuinely passionate about it. I enjoyed what do I call it? The challenge that it presented, like, you know, the respect that the art had of like bodybuilding and everything, of like, you know, really looking at it as an art form. And at the time, I was in college, like I said, and Christian Guzman was hosting a summer shredding competition, which was a 90-day challenge to shred down, get like super shredded for the summer. And I really took it seriously. So from March, all the way until June of 2017, I was like, okay, I'm going to dedicate myself to this and really get in the best shape I can. And I was able to. And like, that was the best shape I had ever been in since high school soccer. And mind you, I had been overweight all my 14 years of playing soccer. So to see myself like that lean and in shape, I'm like, I'm really proud of myself for this. And so it really gave me a love of like, okay, this fitness thing is something I'm passionate about. And I would just put out vlogs of what I'm doing. I would do like full day of eatings. I even did a 10,000 calorie challenge. Highly don't recommend, but it was around the time when like 10,000 calorie challenges were popular. You know what I mean? And like everyone was doing them. And I'm like, I'll try it. I got like 6,800 calories in, tapped out. Nonetheless, Christian was hosting a summer shredding event. At the end of it, it was a invite to Houston to go to his gym. And at his gym, I went down at the end of the 90 days and I met a man by the name of Zach Rushflow, the flexible dieting lifestyle. And that's when Zach and I had connected for the first time. I had followed him on social media. It kind of becomes one of those things where you find one person and then it's like, okay, through a trickle, you learn about other people. So that's how I learned about Zach. And with Zach, it was super cool because we connected and he's like, hey man, send me a message. I'd love to send you a free recipe book of mine. I'm like, okay, cool. This is amazing. Thank you. So we connected, he sent me it and we stayed in contact here and there. I kept up with his content. And about a couple weeks later, he actually put on his Instagram story that he was looking for a videographer to go with him to Los Angeles for 5 days. And now I'm like getting into the story of kind of different things. But this is how I got into fitness, why I'm so passionate about it. And he was looking for a videographer to go with him for 5 days. The twist to this story is that 2 weeks prior to him asking, I had just gotten hip surgery on my hip labral because I tore it while squatting. The thing that I loved that quite literally saved my life, that I say, now put me in a situation where I had to get surgery. And I'm like, fuck, you know? And that was a moment for me where I'm like, wow, I'm like, this fitness thing, I'm like, it literally set me back. And it set me back for like 6 to 8 months for not being able to squat and train legs the proper way. Nonetheless, I had to get surgery because otherwise I was going to get a hip replacement later on. So I opted for that. Zach put on his Instagram story that he was looking for a videographer. I'm like, hey man, I would love the opportunity for this. Mind you, this is coming from someone who had only done vlogging of themselves with a GoPro and a small Canon camera and was just figuring it out. Like I was no place to be a professional videographer or even someone's videographer. I replied back. I'm like, hey man, I'd love the opportunity for this. He's like, okay, why should I pick you? I said, well, you know, I know there's 2 other people that you're considering before me, but I'll work harder than both of them combined. And mind you, both of them had more experience than I did. And he's like, okay. So I flew to LA with crutches. I have photos and like a video of like me with crutches, like going to LA with Zach to go film. I'm in no place to even be sitting on an airplane for 3 hours, but I'm like, I'm going to do this. And I bought a ticket with my mom and dad, who actually, it's weird that they were with me now that I think about this. They had been divorced since I was 2, but they were both with me at the time when I bought the ticket. And I flew to LA 2 days later, filmed with Zach, and it was super cool because I'm like, wow, this fitness thing, I'm like, it led me to this opportunity. I'm like, all because I said yes to myself, though. All because I said yes to myself, like making content, getting in the best shape possible, and putting myself in uncomfortable positions of going to somewhere like Houston, Texas to meet up with other people. And lo and behold, that opportunity meeting with Zach turned into the next year of being able to work with him. And I moved from Chicago to Austin, Texas, dropped out of school, had 1 year left, and went all in on this videography fitness thing, right? And I learned a lot about the fitness space through Zach because we had filmed other people. I met Jordan at the time as well, and I met Jordan, funny enough, 2018 of January 2018 at a Pencils of Promise event that was hosted by Lewis Howes, and we had just connected. I knew him as Gary Vaynerchuk's personal trainer, right? Not Jordan Syatt, and we connected and followed me back. I'm like, super cool. And so after my time with Zach, it was around March, April of 2018. I moved back to Chicago because my time was up with Zach and figuring things out again. And so during that time, I'm like, okay, well, do I want to keep going with this? Like, do I want to keep going with this video thing, with this social media thing? I had gotten a job at Whole Foods to make some income. I even got a job at like this car dealership thing, and like to take photos. And I'm like, is this even for me? Like this video thing? I consider going back to school, but I was like, I'm gonna make this work. I'm gonna figure it out. And I love it too much. Funny enough, Jordan put on his Instagram story September of that same year. He said, I'm looking for a videographer. Reach out. I reached out because we had connected, and he's like, hey man, there's a guy in front of you. If it doesn't work out, I'll let you know. It did not work out because on December 1st, he called me, and I was at Lifetime Fitness working out on the Stairmaster, and I see that he called. He was like, hey man, do you want to move to New York City? I'm like, yep. And he's like, okay. He's like, you could take time to think about it if you need. I'm like, nope. I'm like, let's do it. And he's like, okay. So literally 3 weeks later, I moved my entire life to New York City for the first time ever in a small Chinatown apartment, sketchy by the way, with 6 other roommates, and was figuring it out. And my apartment, I'm not kidding you, my room was probably half the size of my office space right now in my apartment. And I was paying like $1,100 a month for it. And but I'm like, you know what, I'm doing it. And what was really cool for me was the time I met Gary V. When we went to his apartment building to work out with him. I'm like, holy fuck. I'm like, you literally saved my life. I'm like, you literally changed my entire life. I'm like, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you. And it was one of those weird moments because I'm like, I see so much of myself in him. Even now, when I am in present day, a lot of my energy is similar to his, which funny enough, we have the exact same personality test, I learned. But like, I appreciate him so much. And I'm like, you kept me going, but not just that, you gave me the permission to even start in the first place. And through working with Jordan, like I learned so much about the fitness space and just content and social media. And not even just that, but like how other coaches behave on social media and why they do certain things, why certain coaches aren't as successful. And like, I literally feel like I have the cheat codes for all fitness coaches to be able to succeed, because I'm like, I know what it's like at the highest level to like crush it. And I'm like, all of you that are so worried about your fucking 1,000 Instagram followers and my video only got 100 views. I'm like, you don't even know. I'm like, those are such small problems, but nonetheless, like to not deviate from that, worked with Jordan for the next 2 years, and then moved on to where I'm at now, which is now I run which is funny. I transitioned out of doing more video and editing and photo, and now I do straight up just strategy and consulting for 7-8 figure entrepreneurs within the fitness space, and it's something I love, and not just fitness entrepreneurs, but like all entrepreneurs, because I know the vertical of the blueprint to run. I just run it within different niches and industries, but nonetheless, fitness has always been a constant in my life. It's always been a passion of mine, and I wouldn't be here without it.
I love that story. And I love that so many parts of it, if not the entirety of it, was you had no proof that anything was going to work, but you kept doing it. And that's something that I preach all the time, because you just bet on yourself, right? You're like, listen, I'll figure it out. And I think that's what so many coaches listening to this today need to hear over and over and over again before we dive into strategy, because you're not going to be able to utilize any of this shit that we say if you are so hyper focused on like, what's the proof it'll work, right? Like, I'm really big on it'll work. Like whatever you work is going to work if you work it, right? Whether it's YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, doesn't matter. Like pick something you love. But again, I will dive into all of that, but I'm with you on that for sure. So I would love to kind of chat in two sections on this podcast and talk about the coaches who are just starting out, scaling to that first, like maybe 500,000 mark, and then really solidifying getting to that first million, right? So if we are thinking about, again, coaches are using Instagram, we're going to focus on that for a second. You loved social media. And what I find is so many coaches are resistant to it. They're like, God, it drains me. I hate it. I don't like it. So I want to first just tell me how to develop some kind of a mindset, some kind of stamina around social media, because I really see this when coaches are coming from that in-person modality, moving online. They're like, I fucking can't do this. So I'd love to hear your take on that.
Which is super interesting. And I'm really glad you brought it up. A lot of coaches, if they would apply the same energy that they do for showing up in the gym on social media, the body that they have would be the social media audience that they want, right? And what I mean by that is a lot of coaches, and I'm going to be completely honest, and I know this ruffles some feathers. Just because you like working out doesn't necessarily mean that you deserve to run a business. What I mean by that is a lot of coaches think that like I step on stage for the first time and I got a lot of attention now, and all of a sudden I can now be qualified to coach people and work on their hormones, and now I'm like a certified expert. I'm like, you did it once. I'm like, great for you. But I think it's a massive ego check, especially now, because I'm like, guess what? All you guys with like your shirtless photos and all the women that want to show the butt photos and everything, I'm like, that has no value anymore. And I'm like, now you're faced with having to make content that actually helps people. And I think that's where a lot of coaches get stuck, is because they're looking at like, well, my body got me to where I'm at. Right. Which it still can, which is amazing because people want to look like you. But the deeper part and the way that you really scale is like the brain's shit, the mental side of it, all of that stuff where people really need help. Like I know people that are so successful making millions that don't post a photo of their body at all.
I've never
right?
put an app photo.
Correct. It's because they understand the psychology of their clients. And that's what I would challenge a lot of coaches on, is like really understand the problems that your clients are facing. Because yes, do they want to look like you? Sure. I would also challenge you, why are we posting that stuff? Is it because we want the validation from other people that we really don't care about? Or is it because, I thought I was lagging. Or is it because we're actually trying to grow a business, right? And so I look at it the side of like, let's grow a business, because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to utilize social media as that vehicle, right? And so if we're looking at Instagram solely, the way I look at social media nowadays is I'm like, everyone, have you ever read the book, The Purple Cow by Seth Godin at all?
I haven't.
Phenomenal book. I recommend everyone listening watch it, read it. The Purple Cow, I mean, when you think of a purple cow, you're like, cows are black and white, right? I look at almost every fitness coach as a black and white cow. You all look the same. Everyone. A purple cow stands out. And what I mean by standing out is you have to actually differentiate yourself from the marketplace and be worth remembering. And so many people struggle with that because it's just tough for them to break past certain limitations or certain ego barriers that they have for some reason. And I'm like, okay, well, if we want to actually build a business, we have to actually strip away the ego side of all of this. Of like, well, it's funny. That's why I related to the beginning of like, well, I posted my workout videos. I posted, all this today. Yeah, well, you're just doing it to check a box.
Yeah,
you're just doing it because,
yeah,
right. And to your point, what I'm trying to get at with like, how do you have that mindset? To be honest with you, it's two. One, I think it's unteachable. I think one is like, you have to really love it. Like the reason Jordan was so successful and why we were so successful, because he loved it. Like he actually loves putting out stuff to help people. Right. And that's why I say, I know at the top level, like what it's like. And I can see people that are just doing stuff for the wrong reasons. And it's like, you have to really love it. You really do. And oh, by the way, fitness coaches know that it takes a long time to get the body they want. They know muscle building is a long time. They know fat loss is a long time. Why the fuck do you think your social media growth is going to be anything the same, anything different?
I use this analogy, and I've said it to my clients before, where whenever you're cranking out that last rep in the gym, right? You make this ugly face, but you still do it anyway. It's like the
Yeah.
second you've done something for 7 days in a row with no results, you quit in your business.
Yeah.
And there's no resilience built on the online space. Now, I will say to the point you just made, I'm very fortunate. I really don't work with a ton of ego type coaches, which is so nice. If anything, I have the opposite problem where coaches are like, will people hire me if I don't look like that? That's a mindset problem that we overcome. So I'd rather honestly have that type of coach because they're easier to coach. It's more about the vulnerability. And so people are struggling specifically that I work with to show up on social media because they're focusing on vanity metrics because that's the only thing they've been taught that could maybe mean something. And when they don't see that, they're like, well, shit, no one wants to hear about me. And they're holding back from being vulnerable and developing a message. Because what I see with new coaches in general across the board, they don't know how they're different. They don't know how they can stand out because they're thinking, I don't know, I do macros, she does macros. I do gut health, she does gut health. So how do you stand out? Give me an example of, how to develop your voice on social media first.
It's a great question. A lot of that comes down to what I said in the beginning of just testing different things, right? Like my whole energy, it seems aggressive, but it's because I'm direct. I'm extremely direct with my messaging. The reason, because like in a world where fitness people understand, where there's so much like of the Weight Watchers, the tummy teas, the like all the BS stuff that people buy, I'm just like, there's so much what I call fluff in the market space. And like, they know that too. And there's so much fluff within social media too. And I'm just like, I just literally want to be direct with you because I know that's what you need. You don't need me to like, oh, it's okay. Like, if like the whole vanity metrics of like, if you're posting, get enough likes, whatever. No, your content needs to be better. It needs to be better. That's why I said in the beginning of like, I command excellence out of you with social and to be a fucking shark with it. Because at the end of the day, there's no plan B. There's only a plan A. And if you really want this social media thing to work, like put in the effort to do so. And let me be clear too, on a whole vanity metrics perspective, what does that even mean to you? Like I only look at posts from a KPI perspective. So to break it down, KPI means key performance indicator. When I think about key performance indicator, that's different for each post. For example, if you're making a recipe video, that will probably get a lot of saves. Or if you're doing a workout video of like showing a bicep curl, the wrong way of doing it and the right way of doing it, that'll probably get a lot of saves, right? Or maybe you're stating your opinion on Weight Watchers or Optavia, and like that's going to get some comments. But you have to understand what's the goal of each post. Too many people get wrapped up in likes and views, especially within a short form video world. I get it because it's easy to compare. I look at it like this. If a video doesn't do as well, and what is even as well? Like, okay, the last video, let's say, for example, got 10,000 views. The next video got 5,000 views, but it got double the saves. That's a win, right? But you have to understand what's the goal of the post. And you have to understand what is the content we're actually making for that, right? That's why I say it's also specific based on the content because it'll elicit a different response. But that's also deliberate based off of the response you want. Now, when it comes to standing out in the marketplace, standing out on social, that's why I say test different content, try different things. Maybe your voice is not being directly on camera and like speaking and just going off like that. Maybe your voice is best spent on a podcast and speaking that way, and you can differentiate there. Maybe YouTube is your forte. Maybe Instagram Reels are your forte, right? Maybe your forte is doing those swipe carousel posts of like tweet posts or threaded posts, whatever that is. But when it comes to standing out and finding your voice, you need to give people something to latch onto. There's a book by Dan and Chip Heath called Made to Stick. I would encourage everyone to read it. There's certain points of people or certain things about people that just stick, right? I hope my thing with you is be a fucking shark. I hope that sticks with you. That is one thing that I instill in everyone. It's because that's true to me. That's unique to me. No one else is going to go say be a fucking shark. And if they do, it's because I said it, right? That's how I look at social and content is you need to start branding yourself, right? And when other coaches, I love that you asked this too, when they're like, well, she does macros and I do macros and she does this, I do this. Great. What differentiates you? That's a phenomenal question. The answer to that is your method in which you achieve results. What I mean by that is having a specific method. I literally could make up, Taylor could literally have the social media method. I could have the shark method. Completely different results. What's the shark method? Great. I'm glad you asked. Well, it's this step-by-step process, yada, yada, that gets you results here and like speaks to outcomes that you want. But you have to start marketing yourself around the outcomes that you create, and not just the outcomes you create, but the methodology in which you create those results, because that's what will get people bought into you and whatever it is that you're selling and your program and your methodology. Because I always tell people, whenever you're, if you want to call it selling or pre-selling or soft selling, whatever that is on social, like always just give a slight to that of like, this is how we create results. This is like what we do. And like always allude to that, because then you're getting people bought into the methodology in which they can see the results.
I agree. And I will say, and you may have a different thought process in this, but I always say, don't stress yourself out on naming a framework or naming a, method or whatever. Cause I know there's some business coaches out there that really push, like, I see it in bios, like using the whatever method. And I'm like, I think that person maybe has 5 clients. So maybe let's not call it something. Or my favorite is when people have a trademark and damn well nothing is trademarked. Like that is like a pet peeve. But I always say, like, you are the differentiator, right? So even though you may set macros the same way and read a Dutch test the same way, like there is something about you in that they wanted you. They saw something in you. And I think so many coaches really struggle with developing their voice online, because we all come from either a corporate background or something that was very much like in a box. And now you can kind of be yourself and do you. And that takes some time to come out of it. And like you said, you have to just kind of like throw some darts and see what sticks and what doesn't, and not really having a bullseye sometimes. And that's where like the stamina piece comes in, because I do want to dive into creating a content strategy. And I'm going to stay focused on Instagram for a second, because again, I know that's where most people that are listening are focused and have found this podcast. So if somebody is trying to develop a content strategy in terms of like, how many posts per week or what type of post, I'm just curious how you start to audit what somebody is doing now and like how you make some tweaks to certain things.
Great question. The first thing I ask is, what do our time units look like? Because at the end of the day, what looks right for me might not look for Taylor, right? Like, for example, or let's say Pam, the other fitness coach who has 3 kids. I don't have any kids. I have a lot more time dedicated to making content and posting as much as I do right now. So maybe for you, because you have 3 kids, maybe it's not realistic for you to be posting every day. Can we post every other day? Right? So I like to look at, where's your time being spent? There's a lot. It's funny. Before we hopped on, I had a one-on-one with someone. And that's the first thing I did. I'm like, where's time going right now with you? Right? He's like, I'm on YouTube, I'm on newsletter, blog, Instagram. And I'm like, okay, well, and he's on Twitter and all these things. And I'm like, okay, well, YouTube, there's a lot that goes into it, as we talked about before, right? So I'm like, maybe it's not our best interest to do twice a week. Let's just do once a week, because in that way we could put out a really good piece of content for that channel. Instagram, maybe it's instead of daily, every other day, right? So I always like to have it subjective for people. I will always push to be able to add versus subtract, meaning if you're posting 7 days a week, I don't want to have to go down 7 to 6 days a week. I'd rather us start at like a baseline of 5 days a week right now if we're doing nothing, or even if it's like 3 days a week, like let's keep it at that. So that way we can add to 4 times a week. I would rather much add than subtract, like every single day, because in that way we're always making improvements with stuff. And that way it's manageable for 3 days. Cool. Then like we could post and add it a 4th day for another week and test it and see what that looks like. When it comes to a specific strategy and a style of content, I will always implore everyone to do video. The main reason is because that is the scariest thing that people face. And I get it. It's because you're on camera. There's like you can't hide behind a photo and you have to talk, right? Like that's a scary freaking thing. And oh, by the way, your mom's going to see it. Your aunt's going to see it. Like the 20 people that you know are going to care, even though you're like, I don't really care what people think. You do care what people think. Like you have a set of amount of people in your head that you're like, oh, they're going to watch this. Like I care what they think. You probably even care what your coach thinks. Let's be honest. Right. But like, those are the things that are scary for people. But I'm like, I'd rather you start there, because that's the scariest part for you. And if you can get that out of the way and build confidence and resiliency within that, great. Right. And the reason I tell people that is because, do you tell your clients to step away from the scale because that's a fearful thing and we should fear the scale, right? It's just data. It's just a number, right? So the scale itself isn't bad. Video itself isn't bad. It's just the way in which we can communicate. And so that's the exact same way that I look at content and everything is I'd rather you start with video. Specifically, if we're looking at a week calendar, I'd rather you out of a 7-day week post 4 videos out of a 7-day calendar because that's the majority video. We are in a video heavy world. Yes, on Instagram, we've pivoted a little bit more towards photo to even it out, but I would rather you post 4 videos a week, especially if you're a fitness coach, 4 reels a week. And the way that would look is it could be a tactical tip on something to where it's like here's how you're doing this and here's how you can do it better now. It could be a form check on something kind of like I mentioned. It could be a nutrition tip, a talking head video. It could be a client transformation, like showcasing whatever that is. That can also be used as a static post as well. You can also talk about a swipe image of a client when they came to you versus where they are now and what you changed, what they wanted versus or where they were and where they are now, what their goals were, what their aspirations were. So there's a lot of different varieties in which you can create content to help people. And oh, by the way, too, like if you have a podcast or YouTube channel like this, you can make clips from it and be able to supplement that for your Instagram, right? Another hack, it's not even a hack, but like when a lot of coaches are like, well, I don't know what to make content on. Mm-hmm. Great. Film your coaching calls. Like when you have one-on-one calls like this, set your camera up because I guarantee you there's going to be questions that they have of like, well, how do I track my how do I track alcohol this weekend if I'm going away on vacation? You don't think that's a great piece of content? And oh, by the way, Taylor, a lot of coaches miss this. So really pay attention to this. That's going to be your best content right there. You know why? Because that's the stuff that's on the spot and whatever comes out of you naturally, that's going to be your best answer because you're not having to fabricate it. You're not having to like set up the camera. Like, okay, let me think. How would I answer this? You just answer it. And like, that's going to be your best content. So if you don't know where to get content from, set your camera up while you're on your coaching calls and use that as content.
And
also with Instagram,
just record it on Zoom, right? And like clip it. You know, like make your life easy. Because I know some people are so hesitant to do video because they think they need a camera and a professional setup and a professional mic. And so just want to like throw that little disclaimer out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And with your Instagram story, treat it like a daily vlog. Treat your Instagram story like a daily vlog. And what I mean by that is kind of what Taylor was saying before of like, the reason people buy into you is because of you. Like my life is vastly different than your life, but the way in which I showcase that is on Instagram story, what I'm doing today. Heck, what mug I'm using for coffee. It could be a Harry Potter mug. And for someone, they're like, oh my gosh, I love Harry Potter too. Now that's another connection point that you have. But it's like, it's those unique little things that get people bought into you again. But the only way to do that is to showcase that and to document that. And so that's why I like saying, use your Instagram story as a 24-hour daily vlog, showcasing like going to the gym today. Maybe you showcase a video of like you working out, like doing an exercise, or maybe there's like a quick form check while you're at the gym and you're like, okay, one of the things that people do wrong with like their Bulgarian split squats is this, here's how to fix it. Like a quick Instagram story tip, where you're eating for lunch, breakfast, like a client transformation, maybe a client sent you a really cool message and like, just to throw that up there. Like there's so many ways to use your story as a vlog. So
no, I'm with you 1,000%. Yeah. The complaint that I get a lot, just to add on to this and close the loop, is that my life is boring. My life isn't interesting. Think about your favorite influencer. You're watching them mix the same greens powder every morning or do the same whatever, like it's all the same stuff. Right. And so your life is interesting. And again, people are wanting to see that from you and it makes you so much more relatable. And to your point too, I mean, I did TV for 10 years, so I'm not afraid of the camera, but that's not normal for most people, right? And so you have to figure out how to chat and show your face. And if it's not just your face to the camera directly, then talk over a video, talk about what you made for lunch that day, give us some simple tips, because I think what scares people is they just assume, okay, if I'm on, I have to sell. And that feels weird. And that's kind of where they mess up. Is just, you have to just build that traction of getting people to watch what you're doing and engage in polls. And that way, when you do pitch something or you do sell, they're so nurtured and bought into you that it doesn't feel like you're throwing something at me. Right.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah.
With the selling point, I know a lot of fitness coaches and pay extreme close attention to this. I know a lot of fitness coaches that they go into making a post with the idea that they're going to earn something versus have someone learn something. And that is extremely important to understand is I didn't make an offer. I'm going to be clear. I didn't make an offer on Instagram for 3 years plus 3 years. And knock on wood, I'm extremely grateful I have not had to. Extremely grateful for that. I made like my first offer this past month of like taking one-on-one strategy clients, and it converted extremely well. But mind you, 3 years of like every day, I'm going to add something to someone's life. I'm just going to add something to someone's life. And oh, by the way, if we're talking about like how I got started on Instagram, like I lost people for 2 years after I left Jordan. I wasn't growing on Instagram at all. I was stuck at like 15K. And then now I'm at 90K, which is great. But like the growth started last year, like end of the year, October, November. And I've been consistent ever since then. I've been refining my message since then. But like every day, relentlessly of like, I'm going to help one person, one person. And if you just focus on that as a coach, every single day you go into a post of my 3Ws method. Who is this for? What problem am I solving? And why should someone care? You will win. And if you follow the first part of the who, you need to be abundantly clear on who this is for because they have specific problems that they need help with. And if you give them a reason to care, they will always stay.
I want to ask you one kind of off, it's on
Yeah.
topic, but it's like something
Yeah.
that I think you're really great at that I love talking about. I say lead, you say hook, whatever, tomato, tomato. The journalist doesn't die. So I would love to know about just how you coach somebody to create I know you said viral hook, but starting off the post, because that's super important, right? How you start the video is super important. And I know people really struggle with that. And I see just the same stuff over and over again. So can you give me a few of your favorite hooks to start off content with?
Yeah. So I don't even have, I mean, I have like specific hooks that I would use, but I'll say this, whatever gets people interested and piques their curiosity, evokes an emotion in them, challenges a belief in them, will always get someone to invest in their time to watch your content. And that's the reframe that I want to make clear is you are earning people's attention. I'm not going to give you a hook to manipulate someone's attention to get them to watch your video. No. I'm going to give you a hook so you can earn someone's attention to watch your video because social media isn't free. You pay with people's attention, right? And so when you're watching social media, you're paying with your attention, your time. And so whenever we do that to earn someone's attention, like it's extremely grateful because they're spending their time with us. So when I look at the hook of the video, the first 3 to 5 seconds of your Instagram reel, of your TikTok, whatever short form video, that matters the most. Why? Because you must speak to someone's problem right away. Whether it's a specific problem, whether it's, like I said, a belief they have or an emotion or something that you can evoke in them to get them to be like, ooh, okay, I need to pay attention now. Or like you leave a little bit of curiosity to pique their interest of like, what does he mean by this? What does she mean by this? I need to figure it out. I need to find out. I need to learn. Right. And when it comes to that, again, it comes down to understanding who you're speaking to. Because, for example, if I'm making content, I'm probably not going to be speaking to airline pilots as I see a plane out the window because it doesn't make sense. Because if I'm going to speak to, the reason I say that is because I actually made a video a while ago about planes because I'm like, let me just make a one-off to see what I'm doing. I'm like, this doesn't make sense anymore for me. I want to just speak to entrepreneurs who are struggling. I don't want to just speak to everyone, right? I want to speak to specifically entrepreneurs who are struggling on social media. I'm not trying to make content to appease everyone. And I think that's where people go wrong is they try to be a Swiss Army knife of content is you try to please everyone and you help no one.
Always.
Meanwhile, if you focus on a specific person who has specific sets of problems, you will become the go-to person. And whatever hook, whatever tactic I give you, like it won't matter unless you know who you're speaking to. And oh, by the way, when it comes to who you're speaking to, I mean, what are they doing from the minute they wake up? Everything they say to themselves, bad or good, everything, all the little things that they do. Like, and Taylor, the reason I say this is because my biggest thing is I'm like, you need to come with me prepared with like a 2-page document of step by step to the hour what your ideal client is doing. Like, are they walking past the mirror? No, I'm serious. Like, are they walking past the mirror? Like what I would do, and the reason I say this, and I would look at like my belly overhang over my pants, and like I would do that multiple times a day because I'm like I'm disgusted with the way I look when I was younger. Is your ideal client doing that? Right? Are they looking at themselves every single, like, are they trying on different clothes in the morning because it doesn't fit well? Like, those are all pain points that they're struggling with. That's the psychology part that I'm saying. When I talk about the beginning of really understanding the psychology points, that's what's going to help a lot. When I also talk about the hook of the video or strategies to like really make a good video, it's studying human psychology. A lot of it is human psychology of understanding like what's going to get someone to stop, what's going to get someone's interest to be like, ooh, okay, like I need to pay attention to you, right? And the other thing that I want to add to that too is adding your own flair to it, being ultimately you with it. Like, I'm going to be direct and straightforward and upfront about it. Some people, they might want to crack a joke and add a sense of humor to it. And like, that's their hook to it, right? There's multiple ways in which you can craft a hook or craft an intro. Even so much so as just like, for example, what I said of setting your phone up while you're on a coaching call, like, and starting the video like that. There's no hook to it, but maybe the client asks a question and you start it with that as the video, because I guarantee you other people have that question, and you just go like pick it, like start the video as if it's right in the middle of a conversation. So that's what I would say is like strategies, like super simple, without being extremely complex, of just starting a video. And I can go more into like the psychology of it, of like what a good hook would look like. But just wanted to give like quick overview.
No, the overview is helpful. And I know we kind of have like deviated from the original content strategy idea. And I kind of want to reiterate, there isn't just one layout for a content strategy. The theme that we're going to talk about over and over again is your messaging and knowing your audience better than they know themselves sometimes, right? And I was laughing when you explained like the play-by-play day, because that's the first thing I do with my clients that start working with me is I have them create storyboards. And you may have multiple storyboards. And I'm like, I want to know from the time they wake up to the time they go to bed, what the hell they're doing every hour on the hour. Because pain points like unhappy, need accountability. No, like too generic, right? Like give me specifics, because each one of those pain points becomes so many pieces of content, right? And over again. So again, when somebody comes to your page, I want them to think, damn, how does Taylor know me? How does Enrico know me? Right. And that's like a feeling that needs to be had. And so when you blend in with 5 ways to get more protein in your diet, that's why you're not standing out, because your content has no relevancy. Right. So
Amen.
Yeah. Amen.
Correct. I know. I agree with you on that. And that's why people don't stand out, is because you just sound like everyone else. And like, there's no differentiator, because you don't really know your client's problems. You think you know what their problems are. And you're like, well, here's 5 ways to get more protein in. Like, that's not what they need help with. Like, it needs to be deeper. It needs to be a little bit more than just surface level. And that's why so many coaches get burned out, because like, oh, my content's not getting views, it's not doing well. It's like, well, no shit, Kurt. Like, you have no idea who you're talking to. And it's like, that's why it sucks, your content.
Bring up, there's like Pam, like they're just not, they're not common 90s girls names like Rachel and Brittany. So I really like this,
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
So I have a question. And I think messaging is the answer, and it might be the answer again, but in my opinion, the one thing holding coaches back from scaling or growing, monetizing, right, at the beginning, I would say, is messaging, right? Lack of relevancy. They're just kind of blending in. What would you say is holding coaches back from hitting that like 7-figure mark? Is it the same thing?
That's a great question. That's a phenomenal question. Is this specific to just social?
Yep.
I think the difference that's holding coaches back from getting from 6 to 7 is the fear of learning a new platform. Because the acquisition channel in which you grew your audience, whether it's a Facebook group or let's say just Instagram, your fear of not learning a new channel is what's keeping you stuck where you're at. Meaning, if you're scared to not learn about threads because you're like, this is new, I don't have to learn it, cool, then stay where you are. Or if you're like, well, I don't want to learn YouTube because it's a new platform, it's tough for me to learn, cool, then that's okay, but then be okay with staying with where you're at. And I think most coaches would benefit from adding in another acquisition channel, whether it's because at the end of the day, like, I'm not saying you've exhausted the audience, but it's always good to have other channels in which you're bringing eyeballs in and communicating a message to, because the way you can reach people on YouTube is vastly different than when you can reach them on Instagram. And also too, this is where it comes down to knowing who you're speaking to, because my ideal client is probably heavily on all channels, but your ideal client might only be on Facebook. They might not even know what Threads is, right? So it's like maybe Threads is not your best use of time. Maybe it's better to put into Facebook or a Facebook group or Instagram, like I said. And for the let me make this clear for all the coaches that are like, my ideal client isn't on TikTok. Yes, they are. Like my father is almost 60 years old, and the rate at which he joined TikTok from the lag time to which it started was extremely shortened as to when Facebook started and my mom got on Facebook. The lag time was, it took a while, right? So it's like older generations are adopting newer channels because they're curious. So yes, they are on TikTok. They're on these channels. It's just you need to learn them.
I agree 1000% because I went through this, like I think it's normal. We're like, oh man, okay, you grow one
Yeah.
platform. And I think the answer a lot of coaches assume, which is where I see the lack of scale, is they want a new offer. No, just add a channel. I think that if you have one offer that's amazing, you can build 7 figures on Instagram. If you want to make it a $2 million offer, do it on Facebook. You wanted to make it a 3, like that's what you do. Like you can add $1 million per platform and just keep growing and growing and growing. As long as you have brand awareness and all those other things we've talked about on here. But in my opinion, the answer has never been create something new. It's learn a different channel.
Yeah. And the beauty with that too is if you're on Instagram, because I'm assuming everyone listening is on Instagram, what I would recommend to you is if your next channel, whatever that is, please consider a long form channel, whether that's a podcast or a YouTube channel. The reason being is because when we look at social media, when we look at content, when we look at anything, what's the biggest differentiator between a short form video and a long form video? Time, right? If people spend more time with you, do you think they would trust you more? Logically, yes. Because if someone's spending 30 seconds with you on an Instagram reel versus 3 minutes on a YouTube video, that's 2.5 minutes more out of their day they're spending with you. So that's more time with you. And mind you, that's a YouTube video. Podcast is great because that's passive. People can listen 40, 50 minutes while they're cleaning their house or while they're going on a walk. Like that's time with you. And more time with you, what you said in the beginning, builds that trust.
Totally. No, I'm with you 1000%. What would you say is the biggest sticking point from 7 to 8? Is it something similar or does it change again?
I think 7 to 8, it's interesting. Because I think people that are like at the 7-figure run rate, they have the channels in place, they have the Facebook, the Instagram, YouTube, but they're probably not doing the best that they can. And so I look at it from a refining perspective of when we go from 7 to 8, I think it becomes a volume game of maybe we need to hire the right people in place, like a video editor, a videographer, or a copywriter to take away your time from writing emails and writing captions. So then that way that gets outsourced. So you can be more in front of the camera or behind the mic, making more content to put out more distribution. Because what I've noticed from 7 to 8, even 8 to 9, it's really a volume game. It just becomes more, right? Maybe it becomes more content on LinkedIn. Instead of doing 1 Instagram reel a day, maybe now it becomes 2 to 3 videos a day, right? And so the way I look at that is it's just a volume game at scale.
I agree. And I think that's really, again, I think that we get comfortable and, every level of, at least for me, and I know you can agree because I feel like we're very similar now that I've gotten to meet you on this podcast.
Yeah.
I've never been comfortable at any point in my business. I constantly stay uncomfortable and I just get comfortable being uncomfortable. And that's kind of the secret if there is one, which there's not, right? So just staying uncomfy. And I've noticed that the closer coaches get to, I'll use 10K. The first 10K month feels amazing. And then what happens? The income starts to drop. The intensity starts to drop because they got comfy because they hit that 10K month, right? And the same thing happens. I see, go ahead. I see you have something to say, but that's kind of what I know.
There's a psychology behind that, and it's what's called an upper limit. I would challenge everyone to read Becoming Supernatural by Joe Dispenza. And the reason that happens, if we look at anyone in sports, are you familiar with Derrick Rose, point guard, former point guard of the Chicago Bulls?
I mean, as much as a random white girl in Texas would be, but sure.
Awesome. So Derrick Rose, he was the youngest MVP ever in the NBA. The next season, he tore his ACL and his career was never the same. Why does that happen? It's because I notice this with other coaches and everyone else. Whenever they reach a pinnacle of success, there's always a form of self-sabotage. Why? Because your mind and your body is not accustomed to that level of success. So it has to be brought back down to homeostasis to put yourself in check of like, no, that's not our normal. Our normal is to stay broke and to stay poor, right? That's why when they hit a 10K a month, it's like, oh shit, this is new. I need to go spend it because we need to get our bank account back to where it was, right? And the reason that happens is because again, it's a form of self-sabotage that we consciously do. But the people that are differentiators are understanding that, okay, I made this amazing. Like I'm going to invest it or I'm going to save it. I'm going to put it back into the business instead of into a Gucci bag because I know that's what's going to get me the growth. Right. But again, there's a lot of mental resiliency with that, a lot. And I would encourage anyone to pay attention to any time that they have a feat of success, pay attention to what happens. Oh, I'm sick. Oh, I don't feel well all of a sudden. It's your body literally and your mind being like, we're not meant for this. It's uncomfortable. Literally, I know this sounds voodoo. I know it sounds really woo-woo, but like I'm extremely high on this. Where like anytime that you're like on the verge of a really big breakthrough, maybe you're gonna make a big offer or you got a lot of inquiries, pay attention to how your mind wants to self-sabotage because any new form of success is new. And your body's like, nope, we're not used to this. It's uncomfortable. Like we have to go back to what we know, what's safe and what's comfortable, right? But every time you choose uncomfortable, every single time you say yes to that, that becomes your new baseline. And what you thought was comfortable or uncomfortable a while ago, you're like, that was nothing.
I agree. I agree totally. I mean, that self-sabotage creeps in constantly as you're scaling a business and that's why I say I've been uncomfortable the entire way because I did grow up around scarcity and I did have parents that talked about money in a way that was like not conducive, right? I was told that I'd never have money, we'd never be rich. That wasn't for us, right? And so those things, even if you're not, because I don't really self-sabotage. That's never been, thank God I'm not like that, but it's not like those thoughts don't creep in, right? Like you're not immune. We're all human. And so when I say every level has been uncomfortable, it's because every level was so freaking new, but I was so scared to not have that again, which you know what I mean? So it's like you just keep going and going and going. But on the other side, I definitely have I've had clients that I've worked with where they've hit that 6-figure mark. And then the next month they're like, I can't pay my bills. I'm like, well, what the hell happened to that money? Right. Like, and to your point, that's what happened. It's that self-sabotage that creeps in. Like you have to have a luxury limit and your luxury limit is going to change based on your business growth. Right. But again, if the first 10K month, you go get extensions and a new bag and everything else, right. And your rent is 3K a month, there's a problem.
That's
Like
so funny. Yeah.
and I don't know what it is, but everyone seems to be, really wanting to move to San Diego when they're broke and trying to like build a business out there. And I'm just like, can you not move to San Diego yet? Like, I don't know how many times that has happened with coaches that I've talked to on the internet lately of like, I just want to build a business and move to San Diego, or like, I'm going to move out there and keep going. I'm like, you're going to be broke as shit in San Diego and be stressed. Be stressed.
Huh. I wonder what the lure is. It's interesting.
I don't know, but it's the last year and a half. I can tell you, I've seen the story and it doesn't end well every time. But okay, I want to ask you a few things about well, actually, quick rapid fire. If you're talking to a coach, they're already on Instagram, and I don't know, money doesn't really matter. Where should they grow next? What would you say are the 2 platforms to jump on next? I'm sure you have questions for me first, though.
No, you're good. YouTube would be the first one I would say. And I wouldn't even look at acquiring another platform. I would say finding the right people in place to help you scale there. So I would take it extremely serious of like a thumbnail designer and hiring someone that's really good at that. A video editor, videographer, someone to help film the content for that, maybe even potentially a script writer for that. I would pour a lot into YouTube because the return, not only on YouTube AdSense from like if you do really well on it, but also from like potential brand deals and like potential clients, like the quality of leads from a YouTube will be a lot greater than an Instagram. And oh, by the way, YouTube is the second highest search engine in the entire world. So it would be silly of you to not take advantage of that. If there's another channel that I would say, I would adopt a written channel like a Twitter, because Twitter right now just changed their monetization scheme for video. And there's a lot of creators getting paid a lot of money if we're talking about financial air, for video. And also too, the written word is an art. Having the written word, not only in your emails and your marketing, that jargon, but being able to communicate a message in a written word like Twitter, which it's funny enough now, they're promoting longer form tweets, in a 200 character word or less is a superpower. And I wouldn't recommend, I mean, there's ghostwriters, there's all this too, but being able to simplify your message and communicate your message in the written word is a skill. And the quality of leads on Twitter and YouTube, I have never seen before.
Nice. How many videos, what's the frequency of posting on YouTube? Ideally, if
Once a
somebody
week.
can do it. Okay.
Once a week. I would say, because think about it like this. Ideally, once a week, that'd be 52 videos in a year. And if you make each video the best possible video you can, great. Not only just that, I would be posting daily on shorts that supplement the video. So for example, if you posted one long form video on a Monday, can we pull 3 to 4 clips from that video and then be able to drip those out throughout the week, and having those videos as a push to the longer form video to keep the cycle going? That's what I would
What's the
recommend.
call to action on a YouTube video?
Yep. So call to action on a YouTube video is, for example, you can put an end screen card that says, full video on YouTube, or click the link in the description to watch full video, because people know what to do with that, because in that way that guides them to go watch full video. So there's multiple.
Video though, like, are you pushing to a lead magnet? Like, what are you pushing to?
Well, that depends. What's the goal with the YouTube video? Because within the YouTube video, you could be pushing a webinar, you could be pushing a certain framework you're running or whatever that is, or like you said, a lead magnet. And dependent on the YouTube video, let's say it's a video around how to get 150 grams of protein in a day, and maybe you have a protein cheat sheet that you want to give. Cool. Let's give that away right in the beginning. And what I would say to that is, it's got to be deliberate. So let's say, for example, you have 3 take-home tips within that protein video that you want people to take away from. Give the first one, then pitch the PDF to download, because you've given them something up front, and then act as like a commercial break with giving that, and then give the other 2, and then remind them at the end of the video, hey, first thing in the description is going to be an entire protein cheat sheet. Check it out.
And the reason I asked that question is because I have heard, and I think this is pretty accurate, not to sell your coaching at the end of a YouTube video. Normally it is pushing them to something to opt into.
Yes. And I would say this, all your social media should be a form of just acquiring people to get them into your nurture sequence, because that's all free content out there. Get them into your email list, get them onto the Facebook group, wherever that is, where you have a more nurturing relationship with them. Yes.
Cool. All right. So we've kind of gone into repurposing content a little bit. So for a coach out there that may be doing a podcast or whatever, I just hear all the time, oh my God, so much content. How do you do it all? Right. Because at some point you've got emails. I mean, you've got a million things that you're working on. So how do you break everything down that doesn't, like, in a way that doesn't overwhelm you? Right. Because if a coach is already overwhelmed with getting a few podcast episodes out and 5 posts a week or whatever, how do you break that down so they're not stressed?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a couple ways to go about it. One, you could literally batch it in one day, like I did this morning, where I batched all my videos for next week in a 2-hour period. But mind you, I spent time yesterday ideating. And I think a lot of people don't spend enough time on the idea for what they even want to create. They think they need to spend more time on the execution of it, when in reality, it's the ideation of it, because then you can go at a lot faster speed when you execute on filming it and editing it, whatever. So I would say that. But also what I would say too is are there areas for you to be able to delegate? Are there areas for you to be able to outsource it? Like, if you're doing the video editing yourself and you're running a 6-figure company, do you have like going back to the point, maybe we don't need the extensions, and maybe we don't need the Gucci bag to be able to buy that. And we could put that into getting a video editor or someone to do the podcast for us for a lower cost, to be able to outsource that, to buy back our time. Right. So then long term, then we have more freedom in the long run. So that's how I would look at that, is, are there ways that we can delegate? And if not, cool, then that's on you. You need to figure out time that's best for you of, okay, on Monday, like, it's going to be my podcast day. I'm going to record both episodes here. And let me be clear. You can record on Anchor, which is an application on your phone. You don't need to do any fancy editing at all. Like, and let me keep this in mind too. Those coaching calls that I said record video from, like, that could also potentially be a client like podcast episode if you want. Like ask them to be on a podcast episode with you too. So there's multiple ways to go about it. It's essentially, if you're strapped for time, it's being smarter with our time there, right? And I would say a big thing that's really opened up a lot of freedom from time perspective is just batching content. Also being that I'm a creative at heart, like if something comes to me, I am going to film it because I have to. But from a time perspective, be efficient, like let's batch as much as we can if possible.
I always say that. And something that I do, I never record or write on the same day that I am like creating, thinking, whatever, right? I make sure they're separate days, personally. And I also typically, not that I have a full content day, but if I know that I just like to separate my business with in business and on business days, right? Like there's days where I'm like fully client work and that's what I'm doing. Those are not the days where I'm in a creative mode. I'm in a coach mode. And so I know that about myself. The other thing that I see coaches doing that maybe might work for some, but I would advise against it, is trying to do everything every day. So the
Yeah.
coaches that are waiting until, oh, I need to write a post for today, right? Like, I don't know let me ask you, how far ahead is your content planned out?
I'm going to be honest. It's not really that far ahead planned out, except for today, now that like I'm ahead on it. But otherwise I never like schedule a post ahead of time. I'm never like, let me go, do this ahead of time. It's
Well, you said
typically
you batch videos, right? So I'm assuming
yeah,
you batch videos for the next 2 weeks, or how long?
1 week.
Okay. So you're a
Yep.
week ahead then.
Yeah, I'm a week ahead on content, correct. But for example, if there's like a tweet post that I'm writing or something, that's probably day of, because I'm just like, I just thought of it and like that's something that I want to communicate. Or if there's a video that I want to film today, I'm like, that's something that just natively came to me. I'm like, I want to film this today, omitting anything that I have batched. So I think there's an element to that where I said of like, filming those coaching calls, like that's like your best content of like, if there's something that you want to communicate right away, you're like, oh my God, that'd be a great video. I just got off the phone, or I just got out of the gym and I just thought of something, like do it. Like that's going to be the best stuff. Forget the algorithm, forget like the hook and all this other crap. Like that's going to be the best content, because that's the stuff, like I said, that like needs to come out of you. And like, that's your best information. Hopefully that answered that.
No, for sure. I mean, I am very far ahead on Instagram posts because we're doing 2 a day and it's just easier. So I typically
Nice.
batch like a month of videos at a time. And I'm typically 4 to 6 weeks ahead on post. But again, I know that I'm in a season of business where I have to focus attention on projects, just other things we've got going on, right? So the reason I asked you that question, and again, you're at a different level, is for these coaches that are still trying to get to the 10K or 30K, whatever the number is. I want to make sure they have enough time to work on business development and that vision of their business, and not, oh shit, I got to write Instagram captions. Because as long as they stay sucked into the day to day, they have a really hard time coming out of that. And that's why I was asking you, if you're working with a client that's struggling, how do you kind of coach them to get further ahead? And that's where the
Yeah,
original.
yeah. Gotcha. So my main goal is we need to be proactive, because if we're being reactive right now, we're just going to burn out and I don't want to work together. So what do we need to do to start? No, I'm serious, because I know too many people who are like, oh, it's fine. Like, I'll just like, no. Like, I promise you, like you're going to burn out. And I'd rather us be proactive as much as possible, because then it leaves more room for, okay, we have this covered. Great. Now let's start to think about like, what other ideas do we want to create, and like really spend a lot of time on that. And so however we need to be proactive on stuff, whether that's, hey, maybe you like one of your days, like that's like your writing day. Like I know a buddy of mine who's a ghostwriter. He spends an entire day writing an entire week's worth of Twitter content. Like that's one day for him. But like it knocks out the rest of the week, and he schedules them all because he has a scheduling software that works for him. But like then the rest of the stuff is ghostwriting for other clients. So the way I look at it for anyone of like, okay, well, what do we need to do to start being proactive? Because if we're getting to the 5 o'clock, we're like, fuck, I gotta put up an Instagram post today. I don't want that. Like I don't want anyone coming to me of like, fuck, I have to do this today. No. Like you're not coming to me with like, oh, I have to. I'm like, no, like we get to do this today, because we've never been a part of a time where we can make a piece of content and reach hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. So like you better be psyched about this. Right. And like I want that energy from you. And again, what I'm saying is the proactiveness versus reactive is going to set us up for long term. So whatever, again, our time blocks, like whenever you need to be in coach mode, whenever you need to be on client calls, whatever you need to do, great. How can we work around it? How can we get ahead?
I agree. Are you using any type of like AI for any of your content, batching, scripting, any of that?
I test out Chat GPT a little bit just to play around with it. Um, but it's just not me. Like it's just not like the way I communicate. I think it helps me a little bit with like if I write a script for a video a little bit, I'm like, okay, synthesize this a little bit better if possible. And I like to see what it says. But otherwise I don't know.
I don't either. I just wanted to ask because
Smart.
your content, it doesn't seem like you are, but
No.
there's so many ways, like for example, creating like podcast show notes or things like that or annotations, but I don't either. And I find that um clients that are joining my like entry level course, I can tell that they're using it because all of their stuff sounds so similar. And I'm like, hey, we need to learn how to prompt this shit if we're going to use it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Like, I batched 30 pieces of content. I'm like, no, you did not. Used AI.
That's funny.
Yeah, it's a yeah. So I just wanted to ask. Okay, so I want to kind of rapid fire some questions that I hear frequently, and I'm sure you have some too.
Mhm.
Um, and I want to turn this into more of the sales thing. So I post every day. I'm doing all the things,
Hmm.
Enrico, and I'm not landing sales. What the hell?
Well, if you're posting every day and not making sales, I'm going to be honest with you. I just don't think that you care enough about your consumer because if you cared more about them than they cared about you, you'd make more money. And oh, by the way, if you stop selling every other post, you'd make more money because most people, they're like, they feel like they need to be selling every other post. But if you sold 7 out of 9 posts, you kind of sound like a billboard versus 1 out of every 9. And like those other 8 was generally you giving, like amazing. And then that other time you made an ask, like it'll probably convert a little bit better. The issue I think most people face, and I'll say this, is they go into social media with such an entitlement that like I deserve XYZ. You don't deserve shit. You have to prove it. You have to give so much more to the other person than they will ever give to you and care so much more about them. Because at the end of the day, like stop looking at people as a dollar amount, as a paid in full, as a monthly payment client, and just look at them for who they are, a human being.
I want to add to that because one thing that I've noticed is I've had I've worked with clients that have a lot like high follower count, 100,000 or whatever, and they've had quick success due to that follower count. And they never developed a content strategy. They never developed a DM strategy. They never developed these like sales tactics. Now they're like, well, what the hell? It's not working. There's so much resistance into being coachable because they're thinking, well, I don't need to do that stuff. I'm above it. And I wanted
Mm-hmm.
to take on that because I don't see that same ego with people like myself who don't have a high follower count.
Yeah. And to be fair, someone who has a higher follower count myself, I'm like, I am learning more of the business sense of it. Like I know the social media side, the audience side, like all of that. Like I know that game in the video game. I've been learning more of the business side of it where I'm like, it's helped me understand it more of like, it's not that I'm trying to like monetize my audience or like really max out on it, but it's helped me understand of like, okay, well, what can I do with this? How can I utilize this better? Right. And I think for most people, where it's like, they have that chip on their shoulder of like, well, I grew to here. And it's like, again, but you're just not coachable because it's like you have this ego thing that you're too good for, so and so and whatever. I don't know if you saw it recently where I'm like, likes aren't cash, likes aren't dollars, like followers aren't dollars. And I think a lot of people attribute, you have a larger follower count. Like you see people have like 1 million, and I'm like, they're broke. But yeah, there's these people that have like 1,000 followers, and I'm like, they're making $1 million a month. And I'm like, they're doing great because they're running a business. Right. And so for someone like that, it's like, don't believe everything you see on social media. So if you're someone who's like, well, I'll never be like this coach, I'm like, well, A, not with that attitude, but B, like you don't know what they're going through. You don't know what they know or don't know. Like you just don't know where they're at. So like it's wrong of you to judge a book by its cover.
What time should I post?
There isn't a right or wrong time to post, but I would say this: if you want to take most advantage of it, go to your analytics, check to see when your followers are going to be the most active. And oh, by the way, not a lot of people know this. Your Instagram follower activity is reflected in Pacific time. So if your followers are most active at 12 p.m., that's 12 p.m. Pacific time. So they're probably going to be most active around 2 p.m. Central time, our time. So I would give it at least a 45, 60-minute ramp up. So post it at like 11 or sorry, 1 p.m. and then ramp it up to when they get on there at like 2.
It's wild to me how many people don't know that it's in Pacific time, you
I
know?
didn't know that until like a month ago.
Oh, never
Literally,
mind.
I didn't know that until a month ago, honestly.
I don't even know like how I figured that out, but that's something that I've been saying like for years at this point. Like, hey, heads up. And also it at this point, maybe don't post at 2 a.m., but like realistically, just get it out when you can get it out. I know when I started my business, I was still working for my full-time job, and I posted at 5 a.m. because that's when I had 10 minutes to get on there. You know, like it probably wasn't optimal, but I got it out there and got it done. Okay, cool. So what is your strategy for threads right now? Is it just wing it and see what happens? Or how are we feeling?
No, no, I don't ever wing it anywhere. But specifically for threads, I think a lot of people are looking at it as like, oh, I'm just gonna post my thoughts and like as if it's like this MySpace blog. I'm like, no, like set yourself up for success of like actually make content that like helps people and like solves problems. The exact same way if you're not on Twitter, but like utilizing Twitter to communicate a message. The same way you would make a video, like just put that in writing. And I it's so funny. I made a thread today. Because people are so quick to like write off threads because they're like, oh, threads is dead, threads are dying, oh, like not a lot of users are on it anymore. And I'm like, it's been around for a month. Last time I checked, it takes longer than a month for anything to become substantial. And I'm like, it just really goes to show how society is with like this quick instant gratification of like, if this isn't working, I'm like, give the app, give the platform a chance. It's updating, it's got features coming out. Like, I think the early adopters are going to be successful, and the people that aren't on platforms like that are going to be the ones that come back 3 years later and be like, oh, it's too saturated now. Why bother?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. I think threads is fun. I think we're just figuring out. So how
Yeah.
many times a day are you posting on it? Ish.
Right now, like 4 to 5.
And that's for you, or is it just like stuff that comes to you naturally during the day? Are you using any like major hooks from Instagram posts? Like, how are you kind of using that?
So good. That's a great question. So I also have a backlog of like Twitter content from the past year, which I have been recycling on there as just my thoughts. And it's been performing a lot better because the audience is far more engaged on there. But even just anything of like any scripts that I have for a video, I'll be like, okay, like how can I synthesize this for a thread post of like, okay, like even talking about like how to turn one piece of content into 39 pieces of content, and I give like the blueprint for that. And so it's just simple bite-sized stuff that like people can digest.
Yep. Cool. Love that. Um, cool. So the question that comes to mind next is, what is good content? How does somebody qualify content as good?
That's a great question. Good content. Again, I think that depends on what the KPI is of each post. Like the audience decides what good content is. The audience decides, not the algorithm. And a lot of people are like, oh, the algorithm didn't like my content. No, 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 Becky, the audience didn't like your content. And so, for example, if you are struggling with knowing what is good content, well, that's why I said test a bunch of different things and see what's performing, see what people are enjoying, see what's starting conversations, see what's getting people to share it more, see what's getting people to send to save it more, right? Don't only view your content as good based on the likes it gets or the views it gets. Understand what the key performing indicator is of each post, and not even judge it by that, but use that as data to collect of like, okay, this is a good style of content. I should probably replicate this for a different message.
And I know that this is a common one too, but I see this more with new coaches, or if a coach is maybe at a level where it's like it's time to tweak something to grow to that next stage, right? And I know for me, whenever I first started migrating from primarily fitness coaching to doing a little bit of like business coaching at the very beginning, I lost a bunch of followers. And I didn't give a shit because I knew I was cleaning house for more people to come. But I know that people don't think that way. So do you hear that have you noticed that yourself, losing some followers when you're changing strategies?
I lost followers for 2 years after I left working with Jordan. 2 years. And people lose followers for 24 hours and they think the world's fucking ending. And I'm like, relax. It's like you're fine. But if you also have the perspective of I'm losing audience because I'm losing the wrong people and I'm making room for the right people, great. And we can expand our timeline. And that's why I said I lost people for 2 years. I didn't start growing until last October. Literally last October. I had multiple checkpoints where I could be like, screw this, I don't want to do it anymore. Multiple times. Right. And it's like, there was proof that like content's not working. It's not doing well. I'm getting literally 30 likes and I have 15,000 followers. I look like I bought my audience, which I've never spent $1 on followers, but it looks like it's fake because I'm transitioning, because I'm posting the content I actually want to post. And I know it's going to probably take at least a year, at least. And it took almost 2 years for it to resonate, to find the right people. And now that I have the right people, but it took 2 years. People aren't willing to even go through 2 seconds with a post not doing well. And if you're not willing to do that, then you best get off social media. But if you are, good, then stick with it.
Yeah, 1000%. So I want to go over a few questions that were submitted on a post or a poll I made on Instagram, and I haven't really looked at these yet, so we'll see what happens. Some of these I think we may have covered a little bit earlier, but the first thing is the ability to adapt and be in the know with algorithm changes. How do you kind of adjust to that?
I love that question. When it comes to the algorithm, I don't really even pay attention to the algorithm. I'm just like, I need to make my content better. And what I mean by that is, if reels are not getting prioritized as much because Adam Mosseri said that, cool. Then I make a pivot to making more graphics, making more carousel style posts. Like, let me be clear. If people are going to be butthurt about the algorithm of like, oh, I can't believe the algorithm changed. Do you own the platform? No. Like, it's free for you to post on it. So either you can get off because you don't like it, or you adapt to it. That's how I look at life. You adapt to everything. Everything. We're just adapting to it. And like, again, if I don't like the platform, then I'll go make my own. I don't have the capital to do that, but you know what? Like, Instagram's my, like, it's my channel right now, and there's other channels that I use as well. But like, if that's a channel right now, great. Like, I'm gonna adapt to it.
I think people are just putting too much emphasis on the algorithm. They always have,
Yeah.
right? It's always about beating the algorithm. No change. Like, I've never seen an algorithm change where it's impacted my income, because I can control sales. I can control outbound reach. I can control all of those things. I can't control what's going to get the most views necessarily. But again, if I'm seeing a trend where things are down over a period of time, at least more than 30 days, I may start to think, okay, is my messaging falling flat? But again, having a panic attack because, oh my God, my views are down. What the hell, right? It's something's probably changing. I mean, I'm sure you see changes all the time with views, likes, whatever. And I just assume something's going on with Instagram, right? Until I see a drop in sales, I really don't panic.
But that's when I tell people we should be building the email list on the back end so we don't have to rely on public social platforms.
Also, yes. Next podcast episode. Just kidding.
Yeah, no, seriously.
Okay, the next one. What are the best numbers to use? I don't know what this is for, but what are the best numbers to use, and also time range to post? I don't know what best numbers to use. So I'm thinking this is maybe asking about like how many times to post, which you're saying, take what you're doing now and just make it better, right? You don't want to subtract anything. So I'm going to segue into the next one. This is a client of mine, and I love this question because I know it's a pain in the ass for everyone. Speaking of KPIs, right? Like, how can I track my KPIs on Instagram or social media in a way that maybe isn't manual? Do you have any tips or tricks on KPI tracking?
Great question. To be honest, I don't know of any like external softwares to be able to track Instagram metrics. I'm sure there's a way to do it. Off the top of my head, no, I don't, but I just look at the KPIs of each post manually, and that's what works for me. So I don't know beyond that, and I don't have an answer for fully beyond that. Yeah.
I think at least for me, there are some KPIs that need to be in a spreadsheet, and there are some KPIs that you just need to take mental note of, right? And I think if overall you're noticing, like, if some post got an abnormal amount of saves, then make a note of that somewhere.
Yeah.
But I don't think you need to track likes and saves and shares for every single post, every single day, everywhere. I really like to look at trends over time, especially for my solopreneurs that are listening right now. If you don't have a VA that can help you with KPI tracking, sales metrics are number one. And then just every 7 days, check your Instagram metrics. That's a rule for me. I don't know if you have anything to add or would agree.
Yeah, well, that's also true too, because I think a lot of people like, oh, I'll just have someone else do that. I'm like, but it's your audience. Like, you should have a vested interest in it. Of like, maybe the ratio from men was 61%, now it's down to 55%. So you're getting more female followers. Like, maybe you're speaking to more women. Great. Like, is that what you wanted, or is that not what you wanted? Like, that's important to understand too. Also, like the demographic of like what the age range is, and being able to understand that too. And like seeing each post, like maybe it reached more non-followers and followers. Great. So like this did well. I should probably revisit it in the future. And like that's something that is feedback for you that you need to take mental note of, like you mentioned, because for yourself, that's kind of like a pat on the back of like, okay, good, I did a great job with that. Cool. Like it reaffirms I should probably do that again, or what could I tweak a little bit better? And I think without that, if someone else is just doing that for you, then like you're so disconnected with your audience and with your social, like it doesn't make sense.
Agreed. Okay, this person is saying male versus female marketing. Do they require different strategies? My first thought is just understanding buyer types in general, but I mean, and psychology, like you've mentioned, but would love to know if with your clients you take different strategies.
Well, that depends. I mean, the goals men have are a lot different than what women have, right? I mean, for example, like for men, they probably want to get their testosterone up if they're over 40 or 50, whatever it is. Like that's a goal for them. For women, maybe it's being able to get ready to have a child, or what do I do to lose my baby weight, which men can't ever like deal with. So it comes down to understanding like, well, who is my consumer? Like if it is female, great. Like what are the problems that they're struggling with? What do they need help with? What are the pain points that they have? They're going to be vastly different than what my pain points are, right? Which rightfully so. So it comes down to understanding who specifically, and that's what I'm saying. Who is like to a T? What are their problems?
Yep, I agree. I mean, I think the overarching theme of this entire podcast is your messaging has to be so stupid clear to stand
Yes,
out online. The excuse of saturation is just like, I'm over it, right? Like, whatever.
I know.
Like, you want to be an online coach? Okay, cool. You want to be successful and have time freedom and all these other things? Okay, cool. So you have to do what like 99% of people are like not willing to do, the end.
Reach that. I love that.
I
I'm
guess
with,
that's
I'm with, I know. I literally can't expand on that anymore because I'm like, it just is what it is. And most people just aren't willing to do that.
so
It's
basically,
true.
whenever you're listening to this podcast, I know it's overwhelming to hear a lot of things at once. So my rule of thumb is to find two things that you heard that you were like, damn it, I love that, and implement them within 48 hours. That is what I would
Ooh.
suggest. What is your homework from this podcast? I love homework assignments. So like give some homework assignments.
My main homework assignment is I would go write down a page or two of like your ideal client, of like understanding exactly what they're struggling with, and then write a T chart of like the problems and solutions that you have. So like what are the problems that they're facing, and what is your specific solution to solving that? Do it for 20 of those problems. And oh, by the way, when you have all those, great. Now I want you to write 10 more ways in which you can communicate that message. And I want you to get really clear with it of like, okay, I could do a talking head video. I could present it this way. Maybe I could do a voiceover and just show clips of myself. Like, talk about different ways in which you could present it, and really spend a lot more time on the idea of your content versus the execution of it. And then number two, just go be a fucking shark. Whatever you do, it literally says it right there, because that's my motto and way of life. Because sharks only can swim forward, and even if they have to swim backwards, it's still in a forward motion because they can't physically go backwards or they'll die.
So the moral is if you don't move forward, you will die. I'm just
Facts.
kidding, but also maybe a little bit. Cool. Well, if you want to get in touch with Enrico, his information is definitely down below in the show notes. But anything else you want to say or share? This has been fun.
Yeah, thank you. No, it's been amazing. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.